Coming up on today's show, we are talking racial injustice, calling on our allies, and looking for solutions. Hello, darlings, and welcome to today's show. I am your host, Portia Scott, and this is a very special show. We are doing a special town hall as we talk about the racial injustices that we've seen for far too long. We're calling on our allies and we are looking for solutions. So I am so happy that you are here. Pam, thank you so much for joining. I know Michael Bailey, thank you so much for joining. Rosetta, you're in here. Thank you so much for joining, darling. If you guys can share this broadcast, we want to make sure that you're coming in to listen and also that you give us your comments, that you ask your questions. We want to make sure that we're having a very open and honest conversation, but that we're having a conversation that will hopefully lead us to start, to begin, to continue looking for solutions, and not only looking for those solutions, but doing something about it. I always say this is that we can't feed the 5,000, but we can feed one. And what does that mean? That means that each and every one of us can play our part as we begin to try to put together this country, to try to put together the racial divides, to try to get answers and solutions to just the systemic issues that we see. Val, thank you so much for joining. Ella, thank you so much for joining, darling. Rosetta, thank you so much for joining. I am so excited about tonight because we have an incredible panel of people that will be joining me. So it just won't be me, but we have a panel that is put together with Martinez Sellers. He is, as you guys all know, he is our resident co-host, our resident mental health professional here at Wake Up and Show Up at Portia Scott Media. We always call on him. He's going to be in the building. We also have Jason T. Mahoney, who is a trauma specialist. He is also the motivator. And so we're going to have him in the building as well as we really talk about the trauma and the trauma that we feel each and every time we see those videos, each and every time something happens in our community. We also have Marquerita Story, who is going to talk to us as well from a spiritual standpoint. She is a pastor in New York, and so definitely has seen her fair share and have dealt with this as well. And then we're also going to have the love of my life, John Henry Scott III, who is also a pastor, but also is able to maneuver in the corporate world. And so, and as a Black man with Black boys, I thought it was important that we have him on. Before we bring our panel on, though, we're going to have a guest come on. And what I wanted to do with this conversation is I wanted to make sure that we had someone, when we say ally, I want you to understand that means somebody that's non-Black, that has come on for the causes, to stand up for the causes, to help us. We talk about this all the time when we talk about women inequality, that it's important to have men as allies. So what we're really saying is allies are those people that are part of the majority group, right? Or the group that is oppressing, or the group that we have, that we're seeing this racism from. And so to have somebody come on to talk about it, to be an ally, to help us figure out what are some of these solutions, as well as what can some of our non-Black friends that want to help, what can they do? And so we're going to bring her on. And our guest for today is J. Love Calderon.
Hey.
How did I say it? How did I do?
Well, Portia, yes, you did that. You did a little R roll. Yes.
My husband could have probably said it better because, he's Spanish speaking.
Okay.
So,
Calderon.
Has the roll of the R's. Yes, Calderon.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, J. Love, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you being here. I don't think we have this conversation enough with our non-Black allies. And not just that, I think that the big thing is, and I want to read a little bit about, I know you're a coach and a trainer, a creative and lifelong anti-racist activist. And so give us a little bit about what does that mean, the anti-racist activist?
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the show. It's definitely an honor. So an anti-racist activist. So the term came about because there's a lot of people who are activists, but don't have a racial justice lens. And so for us as white people who are identifying as standing for the liberation and freedom of Black people and brown people, it was important that we put an anti-racist in front of activists to confirm our commitment to ending white supremacy. And so it's an identifier. And at some point, hopefully it won't have to be here, but for now, we have to identify ourselves as activists who are about the business of ending white supremacy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. John, did you have something?
No, I love that. I think it's important.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say what you said at the end. One day, hopefully, that is our hope. That is our prayer that we won't have to say that. But I think you make it a good point where a lot of people are activists, but maybe not for brown and Black communities, not for racism and hate for different things. So I think one of the things, Ella kind of told me, she said, I have the perfect person for you. And so let's just go ahead and jump in. One of the things that, I know the initial reactions that we have when we see these videos, when this comes up, we have, we're just like, I cannot believe it's happening. It's just this feeling of almost like losing a son, a father of your own. And so when you stand, in these circles, when you see that, what does that do to you? And is it uneasy because knowing the color of your skin and it being somebody with the same color that has, done this horrific act or of racism? Yeah,
great question. So yeah, I think for me as a white person, it is rage, it is discomfort, it is sadness, it is also recognizing the responsibility in it, because I could not choose to be born white. I was born white, which we know is a social construct, but racism is real. So I'll identify as white until racism is gone, by the way. So I don't have an option to be born white, but I do have an option of what I can do about it. And I have to stay in the discomfort of being in the skin of an oppressor. Like, that's my history. Like, I can't change that. And that means that I have to be able to look at that and say, like, my ancestors did this and are still doing this. And so what am I going to do to become radically white and do my part in ending white supremacy and ending police murder of Black and brown people? But I think the key here, Portia and John, is white people, we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And a lot of us are not willing to be there. And we want to go away from the discomfort. So to do that, we have to do cognitive dissonance, right? We have to say, well, the police are here to serve us. They must have done something wrong. The structure is set up for everybody to succeed. So if somebody's not succeeding, it's their fault, right? Not the structures that be. So I would just say that, like, I am entitled to my emotional reaction to what's happening, but my duty is to do something about it. And part of that is living in the discomfort. And the second part of that is being in action and putting my body on the line for true racial justice.
That's great. Baby, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jayla, first I want to acknowledge you just for the courage that it takes in order to even to take on that mantle or that role or that mission or that purpose of saying, hey, not only am I an activist, but bringing concrete, clear definition around I'm an activist for this, especially understanding the history of the nation in which we all live, right? So I acknowledge you for that, and I am just grateful for the work that you do. The question that I have for you is looking at the courage that it takes in order for you as what we would call in the Black community as a woman of privilege to stand up for racial injustice in the different mediums in which you do. How do you deal with some of the backlash, whether it is direct or indirect, that comes from the white community as a result of not only just standing alongside people who are dealing with systemic oppression still in 2020, but how do you deal with that? Because I think that if you can speak to that, what I know is that in my circle, there are so many people who are white who want to speak up and who want to, stand up for these causes, but the retaliation is real.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in hearing how you deal with that.
Thank you. Yes, and I want to say that I made a lot of mistakes, and I'll continue to make mistakes as I am practicing being an accomplice to folks of color. So I want to say I'm flawed, and I will continue to look at my privilege and recognize that as a white person, no matter how much I work on it, I will always have blind spots because of white privilege. So I just want to acknowledge that first and foremost and say that I made a lot of mistakes early on. I was doing part of this work before white privilege even the term existed. So I'm in my 40s, y'all. So like when I was in my 20s, like white people didn't know what white privilege was. I'm not even kidding. So we've come, very far in that journey. But the issue is we've been able to identify certain things, but not do anything about it. My early mistakes was I used to engage in call out culture. I was very mean to other white people who were ignorant and biased. And the way that I did my activism was I would call them out, and I would use tactics to call them out because I was still young in my activist development. And what happened was a lot of pain and isolation and unhealthy ways of living because I was angry all the time, and then creating environments where other white people were shamed by me and humiliated by me and called out by me. Well, I learned that doesn't do anything. It doesn't help me, and it doesn't help white people show up better for racial justice. So took the lumps, learned from it, and now am part of a call-in culture. And this is part of my healing of what I needed to go through in order to be at peace with the fact that when you decide to take a stand, you will be unpopular with mainstream people because you are saying a different thing. You are counterculture. You are threatening a lifestyle that allows white people to feel comfortable. And white people don't want that. They don't want to be told that they are successful because of white privilege, that they are successful on the backs of Black and brown people. They don't want to hear that. So then I had to just come to terms with I'm not going to be the most popular girl on the block. And once I was able to just accept that and know that I could find like-minded community who did align and know that I would be okay, then it was a bit more peaceful, and I think some years, I just, the wisdom is a little bit more deeper than it was when I was a young buck, but I think it's all about surrender, heal, and find right community that is values aligned. And that's how I've been able to create a life that I'm really, joy is centered in my life because I went through that process with a lot of mistakes along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think one of the things that I wanted to ask was, how can we begin to bridge those gaps, right? Between you're on the front lines and kind of doing this work, but how do we bridge the gap? What is it like with, kind of, you have a community, right? But how do we bridge the gap? For me and my husband, to be quite honest, a big portion of our community is not Black. We have Black, we have Asian, we have Latin, we have white. And so sometimes they just don't know. And sometimes they do know. and just trying to figure out how do we start to, and I don't know if it's even us that we're supposed to start having that conversation with them. But when something like this happens, you know, I mean, we've had calls for the last couple of days, actually, from most of our community saying, how are you? You know, just checking up. And I think that's important because sometimes we don't have the answers. But how do we start to bridge that gap? And I don't think it's our responsibility to kind of go to our white friends and be like, hey, another Black man or woman got shot. We'd like you to be empathetic, you know? So how?
Yes, Portia, you hit it right there. It's white people's responsibility. This is the harm that our ancestors have caused and that we continue to benefit from. This system, this structural racism, is white people's obligation and duty to do something different. And part of bridging the gap is talking to our white brothers and sisters to get them to a place of education and knowledge and get them to see what's happening and how white people have been conditioned by white supremacy as well. And until white people, like, we have to unlearn. And until we understand we have to unlearn, what happens is a lot of everyday white people who are not educated on it think that racism is a problem for Black and brown people. But they don't recognize that it's also a problem for them, that they also have been inculcated with white supremacy, that they have white supremacy behaviors, and that our humanity is tied together. So we need to call the cousins and call the family, have bold conversations about race, and educate our white brothers and sisters to bring them into the fold so that they can be accountable to the history and herstory of this country and make some different decisions about their behavior. And I think that can start to bridge, because I think we've got to be responsible on our side.
You know, I'm sorry. I was sitting and I was thinking, and I did a live with a very, very close friend of mine who happens to be white, right? And in that, I was so moved, and it was immediately after the Ahmaud Arbery tragic modern day lynching. And he reached out and he was just moved with compassion. And to get that text and that call from him meant the world to me, which brings me to my statement, right? If you look at my circle of people who I am friendly with, 90% of them are white. And right now, to be honest, I am hurting because I've heard from two of them. So and I think that what's frustrating right now, and I guess this connects to what it is that you were just saying in terms of like white people reach out and say something. And I think as a Black person who functions often in a world of whiteness, with the exception of my church, you know, I'm real time right now thinking, yo, I thought we was brothers. You know, I thought we were cool and friends, and we've navigated through certain things. And so I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt to my white brothers and sisters who have not reached out to me, because my heart is saying maybe they don't know what to say, right? I'm glass half full. I'm just trying to create this space where maybe they want to say something, but they don't know what to say. But then my head says, we have talked about things race related, and we are aligned around some of these things. Where is the bro? You all right? You good? Thinking about yourself? And so it's frustrating. I don't know if we, and as a Black man right now who's been hurting all week, I'm like, why do I have to continue to give my white brothers and sisters a pass?
Right. And you shouldn't. And, you know, the issue is white people have to be able to talk about race. I do work hard to assume positive intent. And at the same time, it's like, I don't care if you mess up. Like, just try to understand what is happening for Black and brown people right now. And if you have people in your life, just reach out. It might be clumsy. You might not say the right thing. But what's your job? Your job is to reach out and say, I'm thinking about you. Like, it's like, white people get so caught up in the fear of not knowing and the fear of being called racist. It's the top two concerns that white people have, which is really sad because that's all based in ego, right? Like that my ego is going to come before my relationship, which is all wrong. But I'm just speaking truth about white people. Again,
Right.
white supremacy, right? This is part of our characteristics. It's like, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing, so I'm not going to say it at all. Or if I say this, then they're going to think I'm racist because I used the wrong word. So it's like white people, we need to wake up and be human beings and acknowledge the tragedy that continues to happen. And when you have Black and brown folks in your life, you need to be reaching out and at least and doing your damn best. I don't care if you mess up. The point is to reach out. And if we can't even do that step, come on, like we've got to move forward here. Like we've got to be able to move forward here.
I love it. So Michael Bailey, he said, I feel you, brother. The silence breaks my heart. It makes me think white people don't care. I've only spoken to 2 of my hundreds of white friends. My heart is broken. And so I think, J Love, what you bring is really that voice, right? To say that call, but this is how we're feeling. And I know that we have white friends, as my husband said, and it does. The silence says a lot, if I could say that. The silence says a lot. Or like you said, let's wait till all the answers come out. Let's wait till we've seen this played over and over again. Like we've honestly seen it played over again. So it's just heartbreaking and almost don't even have the words, but I appreciate you. I think, one of the things, so Michael is a pastor in Connecticut, right? And he has this large church, and my husband and I pastor here, and we have a lot of pastor friends. And one of the things is that in that you have tons of white friends as well. And so your silence is like, and it's hard. It's hard to do life when you know that. I wonder if that was my husband.
Right.
Would you wait for the stuff to come out? Would you wait for the investigation?
Exactly. And so that's what it is about. Be human. Be human. Like in my work environment, I work with a lot of folks of color and then a lot of white people in different spheres, depending on which company.
Right.
And when I'm in threads with folks of color, the first thing that we're all saying is sending you love and energy. It is hard times. Do you need anything? And then in the wider spaces, nothing. Hey, happy Friday. What? Happy what? And then same thing on social media and threads, right? There's white people who are still posting about like animals, and it's like, or trying to sell something. And it's like, no, no, this is not okay. And to me, this is 101. Silence equals complicity. Like, are you still down to be complicit when Black and brown people are being murdered on the street for being Black and brown? And I'm asking white people to show up and do it differently. And bring your fear and discomfort with you. Let's just be in it. Like, this is, we've got to move past this. We have got to find a place where humanity is restored, and that will not happen until Black people are free.
Yeah, thank you for that. J Love, I'm not going to keep you long because I've kept you long enough, but we did have a question. I think Pamela's question is toward you, but it says, Portia, my question is, how does the Black community accept your being on the front line, or is most of your work in your own community? So I think what she's saying is, one, how do we accept you being on the front line? And I guess when she says in your own community, maybe in the white community, or are you kind of a part of all of these things that happen when you talk about just being anti-racist?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pamela. So I'm part of many communities. I am part of multiracial struggles where Black and brown people are leading. And when I am part of those struggles, my role is as an ally or an accomplice, which means that I am there to support the leadership of people of color on the ground. And that's important so that I don't take over as a white person. I don't assume anything, that I know my place within that. And then I also organize with white people because I was politicized to the point where it's like my job as a white person is to organize other white people. And I don't get to not do that. We created this, and we have to ended. So I organize with white folks and I organize with communities of color when asked, and with respect and honor to the folks leading. And if people don't want a white person in the space, then I don't come, because I'm not, we have to respect the leadership of Black and brown people.
Absolutely. I love that, J Love. Thank you so much. So before you go, we put a link. I pinned a link into both of my Facebook pages. So if you guys see that link, J Love, tell us a little bit about what that link is that's in there.
Yes, and I'll be brief because I know you have an incredible panel about to come up. So the organization, My Political Home, is showing up for racial justice. It's a decade-long organization who is organizing white people to white supremacy. There is a call tonight for white people to make decisive actions because of everything going on. So the link is for people who identify as white who want to be in action against white supremacy. So if you have all those white friends who have been silent, tell them J Love said you need to attend this webinar and learn about yourself. So, it's our part to organize white people in this really important time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, J Love. We appreciate you so much for being here.
Thank you, J Love, for being here.
How can we stay in touch with you and the work that you're doing?
The best is my IG at J Love Calderon. And I do post stuff up there in terms of how to get involved and artivism, etc. So, and thank you both for having me on. I so appreciate it. Shout out to Ella Turan, who introduced us.
Yes, she's down there right now. Thank you so much, Ella. We appreciate it. Thank you, J Love. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Have a great
Have a
panel.
good one. God bless.
Bye.
You guys, that was incredible. Kiera, I love you so much. Love you, love you, love you. Kiera is on and she does a lot of work in the diversity and inclusion space. So thank you for being on. J Love, thank you so much for being on. That was a great conversation. And so now we're going to go into our panel conversation. And so, like I said earlier, we have an incredible, incredible panel of folks that are going to come, and we're going to have this open and honest dialogue as we had with J Love. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring everybody in. You guys have met my love, John Henry Scott. And I love what he says, because he says that he is in fact on a mission to serve humanity through inspiration, information, and inclusion. So you guys welcome John Henry Scott III. He's going to be on the panel. And the next person that we have up is Martinez Sellers. He is our marriage and family therapist, resident mental health professional here at Wake Up and Show Up, as well as Portia Scott Media. He does an enormous amount of work surrounding the stigma of healthcare and trying to dispel those stigmas in the Black and brown communities, specifically for Black and brown men. So Marty, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Thank you. And the next person we have is Dr. Marquerita Story. And Dr. Story is the pastor of New Hope Baptist Church in Corona, Queens, New York, and founder and leader of both Impact Christian Fellowship and These Are the Daughters Ministry. So she's coming in to sit on our panel. Dr. Story, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that we're having this very important conversation in this hour, and I'm just excited about being a part of this panel.
Thank you for coming on. The next person we have is Jason T. Mahoney. He is a trauma specialist. And Jason says he was born to stir up the gift in everyone he encounters. And it is for this reason he is considered the motivator. So you guys, we have an incredible, incredible panel of men and women. We're going to have these conversations. So you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. J Love said some incredible things. And I think one of the things that she said was really that it's not our responsibility, right? To have to go to our white friends and say, hey, I'm hurting. But I think one of the good things is that making sure we have that conversation open.
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so what are some of the things that, you know, was said that you kind of were like, oh, okay, yeah, that was good, or that you agreed with, or um
Portia, what I love that she did, she talked about how it was a responsibility for her as a white counterpart to share it with her own community and to ask questions. Last night, myself, Jason, and one of our other colleagues, Thomas, did a show on my talking about how Black men are marginalized and that our mental health doesn't matter last night. And I was so glad that one of my white friends in ministry joined on and said, Marty, how can myself and my husband help? And how are you? And how can we help? Because our hearts are broken. And I just said, continue to talk amongst your white friends and your white churches and your white colleagues. And I loved it that she and her husband shared it on their Facebook pages. And they have large followings and everything because they do ministry around the world. And it just was refreshing. It let me know that they cared and that they were standing in, because they remind us, let's not lose focus. This is a racial matter, and we cannot lose focus on what is really the cause, that Black men and Black families are hurting. And if we call ourselves Christians, we're supposed to rally around each other. So that, and J Love just confirmed it. So that always does my heart good to know that we have Christian allies out there, because everyone that says they're a Christian ain't professing. I'll leave that one alone. Amen.
yeah, you know, as you say that, I listened to my husband, right? And even on here, I could hear his heartbreak.
Yeah.
You know, I could hear that he was hurting. Pastor Bailey was on here saying that he was hurting. We're all hurting, but these are two Black men. And so, Jason, I think this is for you, is that as we watch these videos, or not, I haven't watched the video, but I've seen clips of just the pictures, the images alone just break my heart. And so it's almost like we're reliving this trauma over and over again. How do we deal with this? We're always on high alert, right? We have a 23-year-old son. I'm always on high alert. We're always on high alert. I have a father and my husband. I'm always on high alert. And so it's just like we're reliving this always. What can we do mentally to help us navigate, especially after something like this happens, in the days that we're still left reeling, you know, over the over the killings?
And I actually want to tack on something what J Love talked about earlier, when she talked about she will not stop until humanity is restored, and that was a key point, because the reality of it is, at this point, we're being dehumanized, and so until humanity is restored, that is a point where we're able to really move past some things. But I just want to just talk about that piece of humanity, that we're human. And so we must be treated as humans and not dehumanized. So just want to bring that up. But when we think about trauma, there's so many different types of trauma. First, you have your acute trauma, which is maybe a single episode that you may endure. A single incident. I was in this car accident. So, you know, that's a single incident. It's acute. It happened. You know, I'm able to bounce back. I'm able to be more resilient to bounce back from it. And then you have your chronic trauma, which is pretty much a repeated, prolonged, such as domestic violence or abuse or bad relationship. But then you get into this thing called complex trauma. And in complex trauma, it's when you are continuing to be put into this traumatic situation where it's multiple traumatic events, where it's often invasive, it's in personal nature. And so at this point, Yes Magazine actually, they posted an article that said research shows that the Black community suffer ongoing trauma after police shootings. So in other words, we're now in a situation of complex trauma because we're continuing to see it over and over and over and over again. And so one thing that I would say is to unplug.
Yeah.
Unplug. And I think about when COVID-19 hit. And so when you were watching CNN or all these news stories or the newspaper, all you saw was COVID-19. When you go to work, you hear COVID-19. When you're talking to your friends, COVID-19. And so that begins to, really add some trauma there and then add some fear. And so now you have the same thing that is taking place when we're seeing what is happening to Black men. And so we're seeing it over and over. When you look at the news, you see the stories, you see the riots, you see everything that is going on, and it is adding to the layers of the complex trauma that we're already experiencing. And so the first thing I would tell people to do is unplug. Turn the television off, watch something else, watch some cartoons, watch something fun, go to the park, walk, but just unplug from social media, because that's continuing to put those layers. And then once you unplug, then you can really now get your brain together on, okay, what do I need to do to address the situation for my own mental health well-being? Do I need to reach out to a therapist? Do I need to reach out to a friend to just process these things? But the first thing is really unplug, because we're in a complex trauma where we've seen it all the time. So really just unplug.
Right. I love that, Jason. Thank you for that. I think it's, it's so, go ahead, John Henry.
No, I was going to ask a question, Jason. I'm wondering if there are a million men like me which one, I do agree with you. I think it's important for us to unplug for our own mental health. But I can unplug from social media, but then I can go to the grocery store and I can't unplug from that. I can go to the gas station and I cannot unplug from that. I got to get on an airplane and I cannot unplug from that. I've got to walk in a conference room because I have to work, because I got to feed my family, and I cannot unplug from that, right? And so I think while, yes, we need to unplug, what I'm discovering and how I'm feeling like, cuz I want to unplug, but I can't unplug. So if I'm not looking at George Floyd, and it's hard to get that image out of my mind, right? Here he is laying down with a knee to his neck, and he calls for his mama, which only is just another indication of the systematic traumatization that have plagued Black men for hundreds of years. And then it's created this dysfunction in our community by which now we're absent and wondering and lost, and he calls for the woman who ain't left, who's still dealing with the trauma. Mama, mama, mama. It would have been interesting if he would have been saying daddy, daddy, but 90% of Black men with knees to their neck are not calling on their daddy. They're calling on their mama because their daddy didn't get a chance to unplug. Right? He couldn't unplug during Jim Crow. He couldn't unplug through civil rights. He couldn't unplug when we saw Trayvon Martin. He couldn't unplug with the micro insults that he got to deal with when he's walking into a warehouse trying to work because he's just trying to be a decent person. And so I can unplug from this, but I can't unplug from the micro insults, and I think that's a layer upon layer upon layer upon layer that's creating this prolonged pressure. And what we're seeing right now is the pressure cooker has popped. And so those of you guys from the West Coast, West Side, that's what I represent. Y'all remember the riots, right? We remember the Rodney King riots because we couldn't unplug. Basically what I'm saying is like, how do we do that? How we do that? I can turn the TV off, but it's not going to, like, my melanin doesn't go away. And unfortunately, I can be Ivy League educated. I can be a global executive. I can be a pastor. I can be married to an amazing wife, raising my child who I had as a teenager, and still trying to find a space to unplug. Exactly. And now I can't even come in my own house and unplug, because can I sit on my gazebo without the popos thinking that I'm in somebody else's property? I'm just asking for a friend.
I love that. I love that you brought that up, because the reality of it is, and if you look at it from the perspective of like something you plug into a socket. So when you unplug and make a decision what I'm unplugging from. And then we have to make a decision, what do I need to plug to in order for my mental stability? And you brought up a really good point, is that who we are as a Black man, we can't unplug from that. That's just who we are. And when we go into society, that's what they're going to see. But that's where we have individuals like, the church. Can we plug into the church to really help us address the trauma that we have going on? Can we plug into actually engaging in mental health treatment, because like you said, there's so many layers that we have with us as Black men. Like you said, he called out his mom, didn't call out his dad. That's a whole different subject. But when we look at, when we make a decision to unplug from social media and all those, the images and things that we're seeing, what is it that we can plug into? And that's where I challenge the faith-based community. I challenge our own community. I challenge religious leaders. I challenge our elected officials and politicians to say, okay, what can we as a people plug into that's going to be a safety guard for us? And I look at our pastor that we have, when I look at Marty, these are places where we can plug into, but the two questions are out there. Are they available for us to plug into? Are they prepared for us to plug into? And then are they going to be approachable for us to plug into? I think what has happened is we have been so oppressed for so long that we have not created the opportunities for us to plug into. So does that go to your question of, once I unplug, where can I plug into for my mental health, or for my safety, for my well-being? And I think that's where we go into, what is the community, what is our community going to do to really set up those opportunities to be trauma informed, to really support us in this complex trauma? Because complex trauma is ongoing, and that's where we are, is layer after layer after layer after layer. So I lean to individuals such as Marty and you know, Miss our pastor that's on the phone, is where can we go once we have unplugged from those things? What can be done in our communities to plug into?
Absolutely,
Okay.
Marty.
Yes, by the same token, John, everything that you have stated there is classic criterion A of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Exactly.
Yes.
We identify that. You talked about, when we talk about, there's criterion, and I call it cultural, racial, post-traumatic stress. We only think about it because I may not have been to the military, but we are in a war zone constantly. I say it this way: even in the military, you're deployed for X amount of time, and you know that you can come back to safety.
Exactly.
But many of us cannot return and go back to. We live in a war zone. We're constantly being. So what do you have? You have some of the criterion for the criterion A of that is, you know, your overt racial slurs and threats made by anyone. That's be criterion A. Police harassment, body searches, assault, putting on the curb at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I've been there. That's criterion A. Workplace discrimination, that's criterion A. Community violence, that's criterion A. Distress from medical experiences, that's criterion A. Incarceration, that's criterion A. You see where I'm going with it? Immigration difficulties, that's criterion A. Deportation, we meet all of that's just part of the we're experiencing post-traumatic stress constantly, and the constant microaggressions that we're always experiencing. So you're always in this state of I'm nervous. I'm saying, what do I do? Hyper activity, hyper vigilance in what you're doing and everything that you're doing, to the point that you are not at ease. You can't walk down the street without feeling some sort of threat, and then it begins to work on your psyche. So your frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, and all that, and your amygdala is now activated constantly in that. So it changes the chemical makeup of your brain, which then begins to make up in our bodies. So we now have hypertension, we have diabetes, all these other comorbidities that as a result of us being in this constant war zone.
Yeah. If I don't, if it's okay for me to add on to that, because Jason, I really appreciate it, and John, I believe is it, because my glasses ain't showing that good right now, but you guys bring in such a great insight, but even to suggest that we can unplug, as Pastor John was saying, to be able to unplug. Jason, the reality is, as African Americans, we are still in a community that is traumatizing even the church leadership that is in the community. And then to Marty's point, that many of us already have PTSD, that I've been pulled over even as a Black female, and I'm not trying to put that in right now, but I know of many of my African American pastors who have been pulled over and detained and had to give proof that they were who they were and where they were supposed to be. And so then we even have Black leaders within the clergy ranks who are they love God, but they live in America. And there is a trauma that we live with, as well as have to overcome in order to continue to show up and attempt to lead other individuals who also have PTSD, and their trauma is being traumatized over and over again and repetitiously. And so even for the church to try to unplug, we may have to put the church on Mars in order for that to happen, because I don't want to make it light with it, but I do want to be honest that we're living in some very challenging times. And whether you saved or whether you unsaved, if you've got melanin in your skin, it is a threat to walk these streets and to live in this country.
Yeah, I think, Margarita, you make a good, go ahead. I just wanted to say one thing, John Henry, to you, is because I think one of the things that, I went back and forth about having this conversation, about putting it out there. And I think one of the reasons why I keep putting it out there, because before I mean, I would admit I probably wouldn't have had this conversation. I wouldn't have pushed it, right? Because you get the backlash, you get all of these things. But what I want to do is I want to humanize the Black face. And so if I can put my face out, John Henry, you can be vulnerable like you were, that people, maybe somebody will say, it doesn't matter the color of his skin, but he is hurting. And that's the humanity in it. And so that's why I wanted to do this, so that we could humanize humans and stop dehumanizing, as Jason said, as J Love said, is that when you see us, you're, it's a fear there. And Dr. Story, you're right. I don't want to only put this as into this one episode that happened this week, because it happened just a couple of weeks ago to a woman who was sleeping in her bed. So it's not just the Black man, it is the Black race. And so I am hoping that what J Love said, what we're saying and putting our heart out there is, you know me. You know me. I'm not a criminal. My family is not a criminal, but even if they were, they do not deserve the kind of treatment that George Floyd got. Even if he was writing a bad check, did he deserve that? But hopefully you'll look at me and something will say, you know what, I need to stand up. This is not right. Exactly. I know her as a human. And so I'm hoping that that's what some of this does, is just humanize the Black face. John Henry, go ahead. I know you had something to say, love.
Yeah, no, I was just going to speak in terms of being a pastor, right? I am that pastor, and I am expected to be the place where everybody can plug into. And the only way that we're able to do that effectively is through the anointing. There's no way to be able to do that in your own flesh, because what causes us to be effective is to be able to show our own wounds and say, I'm hurting just like you, but because of the call and because of the anointing, then my responsibility is to put my hand in your hand, and let's walk together to the hands of the one who can actually do something. But if I'm being honest right now, I'm coming off of a 3-week break because I needed some time for my soul to heal. Because my father passed away in January, and I just kept going. Found out the news, stood up and preached with tears in my eyes, snotting and doing all of these things. And so we are wired to feel the pain and to press on. And all I'm saying is sometimes you just get tired of the pain. And I'm grateful because I'm in a position where I've got a very capable wife where I can pull back and say, baby, you got it. You got it this week too. You got it this week also, so that I can get my soul healthy enough and just take a breather, do some gardening or something. Only to the week when I get ready to come back, get hit with another left punch, right? And I think that that is the story of Blackness in America. Is that as soon as I unplug and I take a breather, it is something else. And I think that there's I don't remember the statistics, but we're seeing mental illness amongst pastors. We're seeing suicide amongst pastors, Black and white, go through the roof because of the expectation is I'm gonna go to the preacher, and then we go through and we flip on the pastoral abuse when these pastors start just acting out, right? When they start doing things that they normally don't even have the heart to do. Now we crucify them and we wonder why they having this affair, or why they struggling with this, or why they drinking this, or why they doing things, because of the pressure that comes on them as a result of being that place, you know? And so pastors need somewhere to go to.
You're absolutely right.
And so I asked the question of, because we have all of this complex trauma, because we have all of these atrocities, and John, thanks for bringing that up about pastors, because I think it was an article that talked about the suicide rate among pastors, that a lot of them will end up committing suicide on a Monday because of the pressures of what's been kind of going on. So thank you for bringing that up. But when we think about the pastor and our leaders and pretty much all of those individuals, the question that I would present is, are we willing to seek out the help that we need? So are we willing to go to therapy? Are we willing to engage in behaviors that are going to really take care of our mental health? If we were to set up an opportunity for individuals to get the help that they need for free, get the free mental health counseling, get the free mental health therapy, get connected to groups and all those things. If we set those things up, would people engage in the services to address their needs? And I'm going to do a two-part question with that, or with some stats, because the statistics show that we in the African-American community, we don't engage in therapy, but we need the therapy. And I know Marty and I've kind of talked a lot about that, especially when it comes to men and mental health. We sometimes have this stronghold that, you know, I don't want to deal with my emotions and feelings, so I don't really go there. And so if the platform and the opportunity was established, I wonder what would the turnout be for us to truly address those traumas and those layers of things that we talked about.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. You know, one of the things that I do, I have done in ministry, and I'm doing as I get an opportunity to serve the men in our church right now, is what I understand is that before you can get a man to be vulnerable, that there has to be two things, and they're both inextricably linked together. There's number one, safety, and then number two, trust. And you're not going to have one without the other.
Exactly.
Because you can get a man to come sit on the couch, or even to a man's group, and they will do what it is that we have been wired to do, right? To function at this level, right? And so I think that in order to see the offering of mental health and therapy, you know, really taken and having this holistic approach, then we've got to do a better job at relationship building with men in the church, especially in the church, but with Black men in general. I mean, we judge all the time about everything, right? And so when is the last time when we can look and be like, cuz you smell like weed and cigarettes, but come here, let me hug you. Because I can discern that you probably ain't got no real hug other than the hug of that food that touched you when you was a little boy. So then now you've got these other things on the inside of you, based upon how we have kind of painted and defined what masculinity is. And so then now embedded in the neocortex and in the limbic brain of the Black man is this idea that if in fact we want to go and we want to be vulnerable, then that means that we have got to push aside our masculinity and our strength and all of these things. And we know that that's a fallacy. But how do we convince somebody that we care when they are immersed in a conversation and a system that says you are less than? And the only way that we can do that is we have got to, I like to say this all the time, you are never going to see me bash a Black man, because I am prophetic enough where I can look past the trash and see the king. And so I'm going to deal with the king. I'm going to speak to the king. I'm going to love the king that I see. I might be disgusted by the trashiness of it all, but there's still a king in there, right? And so I think I'm going to always give the benefit of the doubt to try to build relationship so that we can get those wonder twins working, right? Vulnerability and our safety and trust. And then we go point them right on over to Marty and to Jason, because I ain't got nothing for you.
Yeah.
But you brought up a point. You brought up a point of creating a safe place, and it goes back to that word of humanizing people. And so we create that atmosphere where people are humanized and they feel safe, and will respect in their innate worth, that they're valuable, they're important, they're good enough, they're equal, regardless of what they've done. You're still valuable. You still important. You still, and those are kind of like the things where you can at least start, like you said, let me give you a hug before we even start talking. Just let me hug you.
And I think that's so good, Jason and John Henry, just as we talk about that from a spiritual standpoint. But I think just in, as we're talking about race relations, it really is that. Right? You know somebody, let me hug you. Let me call and see how you're doing. J Love spoke to that. We don't need you to have all the answers, but we just need you to care, right? We just want you to care. I'm going to, it's a couple of things, but because Michael has said two things. His first comment, don't put that up, Daryl, just yet, because I'm going to ask when we talk about solutions. That's one of the things. But he said, do you contribute lack of trust to the broken Black family structure? If so, do we share enough history of broken, marginalized families since slavery? Marty, you can kind of speak to that. And
when we're looking at family systems, the Black family system, and we can take it all the way back to slavery, because Black men were breeded. And they were put into breeding situations, and then the families were ripped apart. And then we go back to now bring it in and jump into, we even saw episodes on Good Times. Can we go right there? When social services, and we always saw the structure of the services were to split the families, because if the father was in the house, then they couldn't get the benefits. So the man left the house so that his wife and children could get the benefits, because he couldn't get the jobs. Jobs weren't made available. So again, we're perpetuating this problem of broken Black families. But we have the power now, and that's what we have to encourage. I love what John was saying, because we now have to go behind and support each other as Black men. Say, my brother, you listen, words of affirmation, and I'm not going to try and jump into a lot of the solutions of it, but helping them out. Brother, there's a job down here, or helping them out along the way and encourage them. Men are already competitors and in this fight or flight. So we have to now how to take those same structures and use it for their benefit and not to their demise. And too often we've been set up to fail. When we even look at court systems and how custody battles. Listen, when I went to court for my own son, I was a therapist. I was a executive director of an organization, and I was already approved as a foster parent for the county. But when it came to having joint 50-50 custody of my son, the same court said I was not fit enough to have 50-50 custody of my own son. And I was floored.
Yeah.
What? I can take care of the county kids, but I can't take care of my own children? Yeah. What? It's crazy. So systemic things like that that's constantly reinforcing that we as Black men are not fit. Where else do you go? So what we're seeing today is what John said. I'm tired.
Right. I'm tired. Kiara said, white people in this country have very short memories, so have to be reminded of the history. And that is true. And I think that when we talk about that, Marty, when you take it back to slavery, when you take it back to Jim Crow, when we look at these older movies where the Black man was removed from the home and all of these things were happening when I couldn't go into the same place as you, but you had no problem sending us off to war. Right. And so the same country that we came back to after war, my white soldiers were able to get different helps that Black soldiers were not. Right. And so now you have heroin. Now you have all of these things that were used to coping mechanisms. Right. And so it wasn't just that they didn't want to be there, but there were coping mechanisms because they were not able to get the help that they need. And so I think it's important that we remember that. And that we know that we start telling ourselves, remembering that history of when the Black man started leaving the house, when these structures, the family structures really started to tear down. And it's systematic. It's systematic. Paula talks about Trump's tweets about when the looting starts, the shooting starts, keeps playing over and over again in my mind. Marty, how do you block out the insensitive comments from, the President of the United States? How do you put actions behind your feelings when you feel completely heartbroken?
That's such a sensitive topic, because now you have to say, this is supposed to be the leader of the free world. And the leader of the free world that I am in and who's supposed to represent me does not care about me, does not care about my family, does not care about and it's redefining those normatives. Having these conversations, one, I believe help. And two, I believe you have to have your own plan at this point in time. I said it last night that we have to learn as Black folk to support our own businesses, to start opening up our own schools, to do those things that support us. And we have to not be so quick to throw the baby out with the bathwater. When we make a mistake I love what Pastor John said. He says, listen, I make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes with that. But even though I might make a mistake or with that, listen, we have to go back and say, hey, my brother, we got to correct this. What can we do in that? But in that, rewrite your own narrative. I say it all the time. Remind yourself, I am enough. I am okay. I am all right. I'm not going to allow your negativity to affect me. I'm not going to allow your toxic thinking and your toxic emotions about me take up any more mental real estate in my mind, because I am too valuable to go your route. I'm like Michelle Obama. Baby, we go high while y'all continue to wallow in the gutter and go low.
Period.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's so funny because I read that from the President of the United States, and I guess this speaks to my concern earlier with my white friends. Like, yo, how are y'all? Like, are we brothers for real? That's what I'm concerned. So. Yeah. But let's not give him that much credit, right? One of the things that I tell our church all the time: the devil don't get that much play. I'm not saying that the president is the devil, in case y'all want to take me viral. That is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that we do not give that much credit to the enemy, because he ain't even all that powerful, right? Because within the context of our discussion today, racism preceded him. And unless we do something now, it will be here long after he done gone.
Yeah. So I think that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about. Dr. Story, I really want to hear your point as well. One of the things we said, the last thing was, we're going to look for solutions. What do those solutions look like? Margarita, even as we look at as spiritual leaders in our community, that we've stayed inside our churches and maybe not have gone into the community. But I want to hear from you. What are some of those solutions look like, from the faith-based community?
Well, I appreciate you asking me, and I am just gonna utilize my own opinion. I believe that the church has far too long hidden behind the passive posture of praying, and I believe that we are going to have to be more prophetic and more proactive in
Come
what
on.
is going on, to the point of the statement made a little bit earlier. Uh, 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 we gotta stop forgetting. Because white people don't just have amnesia, African Americans have amnesia.
Mm.
Because as soon as
Mhm.
we step out of a
Mm.
circumstance, we'll be enraged only for a moment, and then we'll let it subside as if something has changed. The reason why we have the president that we have is because there is enough support for racist leadership in the United States of America. And so the passive posture of the church sitting back and saying that we're going to pray about some stuff, that ain't even biblical. The Bible say pray for peace. It didn't say pray about racism and injustice. In Micah 6:8, it says that what has God told you? What has He commanded you? What does He expect out of you, believer? It says to do justice, to love mercy,
Come on.
and to walk humbly before our God. It is literally suggesting to us God is not listening or looking for the rhetoric out of the church. He is looking for action from the church. He is looking for the church to not just be acting without affection, because too many of us are acting without affection. We're acting because there was monetary gain for us. We've been acting because there has been positions of power that we could get. We've been acting because of selfish gains. And God is saying, I've already told you what I expect of you. And it is action with affection. It says not only to do justice, but to love mercy. God is literally saying, I need you to do something, but you're going to have to be kind and consistent.
Yes.
You're going to have to keep on working at it until it changes. And yes, we already used to being marginalized. So how in the world you worried about being marginalized?
Right.
We got to keep
Right.
on. Our lives, they have to matter to those of us that are in the church as well. We
Yeah.
got to be concerned about the members that are in our church. It has to matter what the environment that they live in. It has to matter the schools that their children go to. It has to matter the economic injustices that they have to. That has to matter to us, and it has to hit our heart. Pastor John, you were sharing your emotions a little earlier, and I was just crying because every time on the TV, I start crying, and I don't know how it doesn't hit our souls. But we gotta get to the place where it is something that hits us enough, where we take action, and our action is motivated by our affection one towards the other. And then you went early on with J Love about the associations, because then the word of God said, walk humbly before your God. It means I got to walk with you. I got to talk with you. And Pastor John was saying, I might not like what it looked like, but I know there's a king in there. And y'all, there's some real work that has to be done. The church has gone through too long of a season of naming it and claiming it and blabbing it and grabbing it. And God is saying, it's time for you to work. I'm tired of hearing your words. I need you to come out here and work. It's some tough work. Stop hiding behind your pulpit. I don't need to see your caller. I already called you, but I also have a command for you. Do justice.
Yes. Dr. Story.
And walk
Wow.
Yes. Let me tell you, you got people in the comments that says you done took us all to church today. You hear me? Listen. Listen. That was so true. It is so true.
I'm sorry.
No. I loved it.
Good.
I loved it, and it was needed. It was definitely needed that we cannot hide behind prayer. But we have got to stand up, and we have got to do something. And that is why the world looks at us and thinks that we're jellyback. And who is this Jesus that you serve, that he would that you don't stand up for the things that are right, not just for Black, but all injustice. All injustice.
That's right.
Pastor Bailey said something that he struggles with the future government, because when we look at it, and this is just for maybe our white friends, when we look at this, when we look at the government, what we're thinking is this going to go on any longer? And it depends on who, and sometimes it's very hard. It's a toss up. I think it's very understandable. We're talking about solutions. And one of the things is definitely education about government, right? We have clearly forgotten about it from middle school. Of who are the people that actually make the decisions. Because if we're only voting for the president, we're completely missing the people in our counties, in our cities, and our states that are actually making and delegating what's happening. Right. And so I think one of the things, and you guys can chime in, Jahira, I know you love poli-sci, but just as we speak to Michael, like, what are your tips to clearly think about the upcoming election? I think it's education. I think we have got to go back to the basics of U.S. history and politics and government and understand how important your vote is. Just not about the president. Your vote is about your mayor, your governors, your senators, the people who are actually making the decisions. Yes, it is them. And so, Jahira, I'll kind of let you take it. But I think when we're looking at solutions, it is, how do we educate? How do we educate our communities? How do we ensure that we understand about voting and how important voting is, and not just for the president, but that we're voting in the midterms right after the president is done, because they're on 2 years. And so their years are up. And so that's why we have other things that are stacked up against us in the judicial system, is because we didn't vote. And so
Yeah, I think that it's extremely important not only just to stop at education, because I think that education only becomes a frame or a blueprint by which we should build, right? So a lot of folks go get college degrees and that don't mean nothing. A lot of folks know a lot of stuff and that means nothing. I think education is a tool that we must steward and we must use in order to build, so that the education is now meaningful. It is not meaningful when I get a diploma or a degree. It is meaningful based upon the output of whatever it is it produces. That's when it's meaningful. So in terms of politics, yes, we must educate and we must understand. I don't know who said it, like, where we've been. If we're going to understand where we're going, we got to know where we've been. So we've got to be able to understand the structure and what's the difference between the legislative branch. That's what you really need to be focused on, not only just at the federal level, but even at the local level. So I'm going to pivot now and I'm going to throw out call to actions, right? Turn your church into a voter registration drive. You should be encouraging people to register to vote, right? Not only just voting for people who can afford the ads, but there's a lot of local city council people. There's a lot of folks over the school board where your kids are going, right? Because 90% of African-American families are not sending their children to private school, right? That is almost considered a luxury. So there's a lot of people that's running. Shoot, encourage people in your church to run for office, right?
Absolutely.
Encourage them to get on those boards. Encourage them to go in and to start doing this. I think it is what we do at the local level that is going to touch us definitely directly right here and now, and hold those jokers accountable. That's what I say. So I think that we've got to do two things. We got to educate, but then we have got to mobilize, right? It is the way that this skinny, tall, big ear boy became the president of the United States of America, because he was able to take his law degree from Harvard University, but went back and began to organize within the communities, what brought great credibility. People forget. Well, I'm not even gonna go there. I ain't gonna go there. But we have to take action. That's the game. Register to vote and vote. Get your church bus. We will send the Uber, a Lyft, a skateboard to get you to the polls. You can go in and right now, and if you can mail in the vote, you have got to use the voice that you have and understand the history. People died on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Think about the history in order to get the right. And we have got to dispel this lie, this myth that my voice, my vote don't matter. It does matter. That's how we got.
Yep. But Jason, so let us know, what is one of the solutions. You know, we're looking for solutions, and we know we can't answer everything, but if we throw out these small things, we got
Yeah.
voter registration drives in our community. Dr. Story has challenged us to start getting involved, you know, and really doing the work for justice. And so, Jason, what are some of those solutions that you're thinking about?
So I was actually going to tag into what John said was really, really
Mhm.
profound, is that education is great. We can educate each other all day long, every day. But if you don't know how to use the tool of
Mhm.
education to do what you need to do, so you can get a law degree, but if you don't know how to use your law degree,
Correct.
then you just have that tool. So education is definitely awesome. But then once you're educated on a subject, then you, like he said, mobilize it. But the problem comes in, I always say, we can plan a great event. We can plan all of this, and we can say, okay, we're going to have a voters registration drive. We're going to have these opportunities, but will the people show up?
Mhm.
And this is what I say as one solution that I think is a radical solution, but it can be done. And so I'm gonna go to something that Dr. Story talked about, was holding the churches accountable. So we do know that on Sunday, this upcoming Sunday, there will be over hundreds of pastors on social media, Facebook or what have you, teaching their parishioners. And so I think this is an opportunity how we twist the opportunity to say, okay, this particular Sunday, we're going to talk about economic empowerment, and we're going to talk about fixing your credit and how you can fix your credit. Because once
Come
you
on.
fix the credit, then you have economic empowerment. Another pastor can say, okay, this particular Sunday, we're still going to, give a scripture, but then we're also going to talk about trauma, and that we're about to become a church that is trauma informed, so that we can address those individuals that are needing the help. And so I think once we turn our goes back to what Marty said, develop our own schools to teach what we need to get economic empowerment, to teach what we need to mobilize the people. And so I see Sunday as an opportunity, because you already have an audience that's going to be there, they're going to be listening, but then you say, okay, we're going to twist it. And then I think once we gain the opportunity to say, I'm willing to feed this mind, I'm willing to do what needs to be done, then we can then mobilize the people to actually do something. I don't think we can truly do something until we have addressed and gotten our mind together. Because if we go to war and have not address the PTSD, if we go to war and have not addressed our mental health, our physical health, and our emotional health, how can we truly survive on the battlefield? We know that African Americans have the highest in, high blood pressures, diabetes, all of those things. But how can we truly use an atmosphere to educate ourselves, to prepare ourselves, to mobilize ourselves? And then once we've gotten it together, then we can go on the battlefield. So I would say a solution is start in steps of, what can we do with our piece of the puzzle? What can we do with our piece of the world? So I've actually challenged a lot of pastors to say, okay, on this upcoming Sunday, talk to your churches about trauma. If you need to bring in a clinician, you sit down as the pastor that Sunday, and you bring in a clinician to actually do a workshop or a group with your individuals. And personally, I did, my family was enduring some trauma at one point. So I called all my cousins, my aunts and uncles, and we all got on Zoom together, and we had 2 therapists to come and do an actual family
Right.
counseling session on Zoom. Because if we don't get our minds together, how will we be able to stand? And there's an old gospel song that used to say, tell me who will be able to stand. So how will we be able to stand if we have not addressed what we need to address to be on the battlefield? Because we don't need any soldiers that are not healthy enough to fight the battle.
That's so good. That's so good. Love that. Marty,
Mhm.
you're up. As we look for these solutions, that was incredible, Jason.
Can I ask? Can I ask a
100%
quick
agree.
question?
Yes.
I was going to ask. Is there value in a tandem approach? I just wonder if we have time to wait to get it together before we do something. And I think that it's not a dichotomy of either or. I think that there may be, and I guess this is for the panel, is there value in a tandem approach where, I mean, I can work, and I can be like Nehemiah. I can build and war.
Build and protect. You can build, absolutely. And I think that's where you and I'm just going to use this analogy where in the Bible, you know, when they were about to go to war, they said put the praises up front, and then the other individuals in the back, because the praises were going to set the atmosphere. And if we can use that analogy to flip it to say, okay, there's some of us who are ready with our fists in the air, and we're ready. You know, this whole platform right here are people who are doing some things and ready. So you put those people up front, and while those people up front, you have the other individuals getting prepared to next go on the front line. So then you kind of switch it more to
now
say,
we have
you
a
know,
sustainable model.
Exactly. I got the front line today. You know, when we get pushed down, then you come back in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
If
so
I could
good.
add though as well to that, I think also Jason and Pastor John, we gotta also look to putting the people on the front line that actually have some integrity.
Yes.
Because one of the things is we can have some amazing people who may have a lot of charismata or charisma, yet lack the character to be lead. And so many of the downfalls of our community are not just the emotional and psychological instabilities that we have, but we've got people in positions in leadership who don't have enough character in order to take on the leadership that is necessary. So in tandem, we also have got to start saying, we're not going to just continue to go on with the okie doke, but we're going to follow behind some individuals who might be not some of the most popular ones, but individuals that we know are going to speak truth, and they're not going to be able to be bought and sold very easily. And so others can be prepared as well, because we've got to start demanding integrity in our community once again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Marty, go ahead. What are, you know, as we're thinking about solutions, what are your thoughts?
You know, I'm always for the young people, because we have to, as Margarita said, as we're having leaders with integrity, let's reach back and pull those millennials as well. Because if we look at the movements in this nation and in our communities, that they were moved by that 20s group, because they got the most energy and everything. Dr. King was young when he was doing all this. Think about it. He was in his mid to late 20s, giving these speeches and mobilizing them. And let's empower our young people, because again, there are so many of our young people who do not vote. If the people who did not vote would vote, we could make any change in this country that we need to be. And so we have to encourage them. We have to get, and y'all, I love it. Let's start with the churches, but we have to go beyond the four walls of the church as well.
Yes.
We know that there are still, if we're talking about men, let's be honest, most men are not coming to church. So we may have to go out to the bars and get them. We may have to go out to the baseball field and the basketball arena and everything else, to pool hall and everything else, to talk to these brothers. And we need to have safe gatherings for Black men in areas where Black men are at. And I'm like that. Let's not be afraid, because they smoking a little weed. A lot of them smoking so they don't go crazy and go off because they have some untreated mental health diagnosis. And let's be honest, as a clinician, the weed is better than some of the psychotropic drugs that they're giving them. So I'd much rather some of them smoke the weed than go ahead and have a clear conversation with you and get you immobilized to do something and impart wisdom and impart encouragement and empowerment in them.
Right.
Absolutely. And you're talking about something what John was saying about, if we're going to work together, I cannot look at my brother and judge him or respond to him based on what I see. I think, you know, even when you have a brother that is homeless or whatever, that homeless brother can teach us something. And you know, that homeless brother will have that integrity to say, okay, let me explain to you, if we find ourselves in the street, this is how we can survive. And so I think if we, and going to the bars, going to the clubs, those things, we have to do that to say, hey, by any means necessary, we're going to take this radical approach, because we're going to rally the brothers.
Right. Absolutely. I
you know,
love
it's
it.
so
I love
interesting.
It, you guys.
You know, if you look at the Nation of Islam, the majority of the Nation of Islam are Black men. And what it is it is this innate desire of belonging. I'm from the hood, South Central Los Angeles, born and raised in the 80s and the 90s, spent most of my days. Let me explain something to you. Is that though well, I ain't gonna say nothing about my family, but and what Gabe said was from, you understand? But they were loyal.
Yes.
They were loyal because there was this sense of belonging and community. And so you can go in and look at some of the social ills that exist. You can go in and you can look at some of the things that work wonderful in society. But at the core, you see this common thread there. It is this desire to belong. And if you can make men, Black men in particular, know that they belong outside of your checklist, outside of the lens of what you define to be acceptable, outside of saying you got to praise like this, you got to pray like this, get over that, do this. If you can look at them as human, as valuable, love them, see them where they are, whether you are broke, busted, disgusted, and trifling, or whether you are rich, wealthy, at the country club and trifling.
That's
you
right.
are all in need of belonging, because in my world that I live in, a lot of times I don't get, if you take me to the hood, that's where I came from, you know, but I wouldn't necessarily relate to a lot of my Crips and my gangsters and the folks at the SWATs and the traps, you know. But if you set me in the Delta One lounge, there is an executive somewhere that is just as broken in first class. There is somebody that is sipping on the high class seat. So I think that what culture has done is it allowed us to create this classism within our community to say, if you are, uppity Negro, you done got this or something, like they don't need Jesus too. I own a house, I own this, but we need Jesus too. We are hurting, we are broken. The same people that's crying and rioting out in where they at, Minnesota right now, fall within every socioeconomical phase. And so I think the common thread is folks just want to belong.
Exactly.
And I think that is the responsibility that we have to men of color, is that, bruh, you belong. You belong. Your mess doesn't scare me, doesn't push me off. Matter of fact, yo, man, I'm still working on this. I'm still, well, go ahead, baby.
No, go ahead.
No, because I'm gonna keep on talking. The reverend is on me.
Yes. We gonna bring them on in for his closing. But I think one of the things I love is the belonging, right? And the unfortunate thing is when these happen in our community, these things happen in our community, we get that. We get that community, we get that coming together, and this should happen all the time. And so my push would be is that we don't just let this be a thing that happens every time something comes up, but that we keep this going, this belonging, this sense of community, this sense of being together, this sense of knowing that we can build and we can do these things. And I can support my brother, I can support my sister in bringing, like you said, Marty, the younger ones along, understanding the history and understanding too those people that are trying to be allies with us, opening that door and saying, this is what it is. And like J Love, I love it when she said, one of the things that you guys don't know is that after that, I said, you can come and stay on the panel if you'd like and have this conversation. And she said, no, I'm going to go ahead because I understand how important this is to you guys and that you guys should have that conversation. So she is there, she is fighting, but also understanding that I'm going to let you have this because sometime it can be about me and it's not about me, right? In this situation. So I think just all of the conversation today has been incredible. I know Asher said it's an issue that we haven't adequately addressed at any point in our nation's history, and it'll just keep exploding over and over until it's actually openly and honestly discussed and attempted to start solving the gapping inequality and mistreatment. And I think that, you know, we had a lot of that going on today, that open and honest conversation, that economic advancement, right? Understanding that, because when we own stuff, when we're able to make make decisions, and money answereth all things. And so it answers a lot of stuff. And so being able to have the money, being able to have that power and things like that to make these decisions. So you guys, I thank you all so very much. I know everyone has enjoyed it. I have enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much. It has been just a pleasure to be able to moderate such a panel and just a wealth of information that all of you guys have. So I'm going to just bring everybody else up at once as we just say goodbye, but make sure that we know how to get in touch with you. And so I'll start with Jason T. Mahoney. Jason, thank you so much for joining us and really talking us through trauma. And understanding that, right? Because so oftentimes you think it's just that one thing, but as you said, it's that complex trauma that we may be experiencing. So Jason, before you go, let us know how we can get in touch with you. How can we stay in touch with you? And where can we find you at?
Well, first, thank you for allowing me to be on the show, and thanks for everyone for this great dialogue. You can reach me at Jason T. Mahoney on Facebook, or you can reach me on Instagram at JT Mahoney, JTM the Motivator, or you can just go to my website at jtmahoney.com. I love everyone. Find somebody that you can plug to and connect to and walk with them through this journey, because we cannot walk through this alone.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate your time. And Dr. Story, thank you for not only taking us to church, but for having just such an insightful conversation as it relates to what we need to do. And it challenges us outside of the church as well. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. So Dr. Story, how can we keep in touch with you? Where can we find you? All of that good stuff.
Well, Portia, thank you again. I echo what Jason said. I appreciate just being here. And there are some incredible minds that are here. And I can't even believe I got under the radar and got snuck up in here. So I am so grateful to God to be here. But I am so grateful also to be around some people who don't mind being honest and vulnerable in the presence of others, no matter what accomplishments we've been able to make. It's been a challenge to overcome the racial divide that is in this nation. And so I just applaud all of your strength. But you can get me on Facebook at Marquerita Story, and These Are the Daughters, on Instagram, and Storytime Broadcast.
Storytime Broadcast, yes. And that's at 12 o'clock, Monday through Friday?
Yes, through Saturday.
Monday through Saturday at 12 o'clock on Facebook?
On Facebook.
Yes. And what was the name of it one more time?
Storytime Broadcast, and either on my page at Marquerita Story.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Story. We appreciate it. And Marty, our resident mental health professional. Thank you so much for joining. Always thank you. And thank you so much for bringing the guest on, because you really introduced us to Jason and Dr. Story. And we're just so grateful. So thank you for being here as usual. Let us know how we can keep in touch with you. Where are you hanging out at? Where can we get all your stuff?
Thank you so much. You are so amazing. Of course, on my Facebook, www.Marcel Consulting is my firm there. You can also reach me on Mental Health Matters with Marty on Facebook, and also on our podcast, Mental Health Matters with Marty, on all of our podcast streamings. Our motto is Speak Up, Speak Out, Live. And you can reach us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, and Google. But thank you so much. And coming in August, I'm so excited to announce, with the help of Mr. Jason T. Mahoney, our book from Encouragement to Empowerment is coming out. So look for that soon too.
Yes, you got to make sure you keep us updated on that one, Martin. Yes. We're definitely getting that book in March. In August. Yes. And then lastly, but not least, the love of my life, John Henry Scott III. I'm telling you, I just love him. Look at all that chocolate just sitting in the middle. Look at it. Look at it. So, babe, you know what? I just want to acknowledge you because I think that the vulnerability that you brought was
Yes.
needed. And so where sometime as African American men do not reach out for help, I feel like what you said made it safe for other men to say the same thing. And hopefully that they will take the message. And Marty and Jason were saying that you can get help via telehealth. Your insurance is now paying for telehealth services. So if you have insurance, also, I know Taraji P. Henson is doing something around free help and mental health and all of that stuff. So we want to make sure that you guys are getting the help that you need. But babe, I just want to thank you so much for your vulnerability.
Thank
I
you.
think you are super smart and it's just so sexy when you're just so intellectual and keep on going. So thank you so much for being on.
You better teach the married folk how to do this now.
So, thank you, babe, for being on the show. I appreciate it. And how can we keep in touch with you, sir? How can we just keep hearing all of the knowledge that you have?
You can connect with me anywhere you can connect with my wife. That's it. That's all.
You can connect with him
Wherever you find her, you can find me.
You could go to his website, which is, our church's website, which is Christ2culture.com. That is Christ2culture.com. Also, you can follow him on IG at I am John Henry Scott. I know he changed it at some point. So what is it on IG?
H. Scott.
You can follow him at I am
But
John
you
H.
probably should.
Scott.
I'm going to delete that after the quarantine. It's only for the quarantine purpose.
But listen,
So-
his aesthetic is pretty cool. It's all black and white and pictures. So anyway, and lastly, I want to thank D. Mitch, the Mac in the back. He's probably not going to pop himself up on the screen.
Oh wait,
but you
I'm
guys-
sorry. I want to announce
Okay.
my podcast is coming out in 2023. Further Together with John Scott. 2023 podcast is Further Together, produced by Daryl Mitchell.
Well, you guys, we're giving it up for Daryl Mitchell. He is the Mac in the back. He is my executive producer. He does all these shows as well as my podcast and Marty's podcast. So we are thanking you, Daryl. Thank you, everyone that stayed with us for an hour and 36 minutes. You guys, I apologize for going over. It was such a good conversation. I appreciate it. You guys know we are here Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for your daily dose of inspiration and empowerment. You guys know how we do. We end every single show with this declaration. Waking up is automatic. Showing up is intentional. Today, I will show up. See you guys later. And we love you. Thank you so much.